Rich cowboy pretends sleep to test Maid, but freezes when he sees what she does. The bitter wind swept through the Wyoming valley like a sharp blade, carrying with it the promise of another unforgiving winter. Leo Hayes stood on the porch of his sprawling ranch house, watching the sun's fiery descent behind the jagged mountains. At 32, he was the wealthiest landowner 4 miles, his estate stretching across 5,000 acres, his herds of cattle beyond counting. His home was filled with luxuries from distant cities, Persian carpets, crystal chandeliers, leather-bound books, but none of it could fill the profound emptiness that had taken root in his heart. 3 years had passed since the fever claimed his wife, Eleanor, and their young son, Thomas. 3 years since he laid them to rest on the hill beyond the whispering cottonwoods. Leo had plunged himself into work, building his empire ever larger, trying to outrun the silence that echoed through the vast house. But as the shadows lengthened across the land, he knew his flight was over. He was standing still, a man haunted. "Excuse me, Mr. Hayes." The timid voice pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to find her in the doorway. Amelia Miller, the new housemaid who had arrived just a few weeks prior from the Midwest. She was no more than 20. Her light brown hair pulled back in a tidy bun, her soft grey eyes cast down, as if afraid to meet his gaze. Clutching her shawl close, her simple brown dress made her seem even smaller in the wide entryway. "Yes, Miss Miller. Dinner's ready, sir, Mrs. Clark said to tell you it's beef stew tonight, with fresh bread." Leo gave a curt nod, but made no move to go inside. Amelia shifted nervously, her slight frame trembling like a startled deer. "Will you be taking it in the dining room, sir, or?" She let her question trail off. "The study," Leo finally replied. "I have ledgers to review." "Yes, sir." She curtsied quickly and vanished back into the house. Leo remained on the porch, watching the first stars appear. He wondered why this quiet maid, who barely spoke above a whisper, lingered in his mind. Perhaps it was her own solitude mirroring his, or perhaps the way she moved through the house, efficient yet almost invisible, as though she were afraid to occupy too much space. Inside, the fire crackled in the study. Leo took his seat at the massive oak desk, surrounded by shelves of books he never opened. His nights were consumed by numbers: cattle sales, land acquisitions, profits. Wealth meant control. Wealth meant no one could ever take what little he had left. Amelia entered with the tray, her movements careful and deliberate. She placed the steaming bowl, the cloth-wrapped bread, and a glass of water on the desk. Her hands trembled slightly with each motion, as if the smallest mistake would bring down a storm. "Thank you," Leo said. She gave a quick nod and turned to leave, but her eyes caught on the portrait above his desk. Eleanor in her wedding gown, holding their infant son. It was the only trace of softness in a room of hardwood and firelight. "You had a beautiful family, sir," Amelia said softly, then bit her lip, regretting her words. "I did," he answered simply. Flushing, Amelia slipped out, closing the door behind her. Leo ate his meal without tasting it, his gaze caught between the portrait and the closed door. He worked until midnight, his pen scratching across the pages. On his way upstairs, a faint sound stopped him, a voice, soft and low, coming from the kitchen. He moved silently down the hall, stopping outside the door. There she was, washing dishes in the lamplight, her back to him. She was speaking aloud to no one, as if the words in her heart needed to escape into the empty room. "Tomorrow I'll dust the parlor extra well," she murmured. "Mr. Hayes doesn't use it, but it should be proper. I'll polish the silver again, even if Mrs. Clark says once a week is enough. Such fine silver, worth more than Papa's store ever was." Her voice trembled, her shoulders shaking. She gripped the edge of the basin. "No crying, Amelia Marie," she whispered to herself. "You're lucky to have a roof over your head and good wages. Other girls end up in worse places. Mr. Hayes is fair, even if he looks so sad. Those eyes, like he's staring at ghosts." Leo's chest tightened. He stepped back into the shadows. Ghosts, that's what he had become. The next night, he waited in his study. This time, he let the fire burn low, sat back in his chair, and loosened his collar. He closed his eyes, feigning sleep. The door creaked open, and Amelia's light steps crossed the floor. She paused at his desk, gathering the dishes onto her tray, then moved closer. Leo felt the gentle brush of her hands as she took the blanket from the back of his chair and draped it over him. "Poor man," she whispered. "Working yourself to exhaustion won't bring them back." "I know. I tried it myself." Leo wanted to open his eyes, but held still, his breathing steady. Amelia moved to the hearth, coaxing the dying fire back to life. She lingered at the portrait. "You had a beautiful family, Mr. Hayes," she said softly. "I hope you find peace someday. The way you look at them when you think no one is watching. It breaks my heart. I know what it's like to lose everything. But you're still here, still breathing. That has to count for something." She turned to go, pausing one last time beside his chair. "Sleep well, sir. Tomorrow's a new day." The door clicked shut. Leo remained motionless, the warmth of the fire spreading through the room. But his thoughts were burning hotter. This shy girl, who hid in silence during the day, held a depth he had never expected. And her simple kindness, the blanket, the fire, the words had pierced the cold armor he had built around his heart. For the first time in years, Leo Hayes wondered about tomorrow. The days that followed only deepened Leo's curiosity. Each evening after dinner, he left the dishes on his desk, loosened his collar, and settled into his chair, pretending to be asleep. And every night, just past 11, Amelia would come. Sometimes, she would speak softly to herself as she tidied up, her thoughts drifting to chores, to the way the sunlight caught the parlor curtains, to her mother's lessons in keeping a home. Other times she simply moved in silence, her touch gentle as she added wood to the fire or straightened his blanket. But without fail, she would linger at the portrait of Eleanor and Thomas. On the third night, she placed a small tin on the side table. "Your hands, Mr. Hayes," she whispered, her fingers brushing the tin surface. "They're cracked from the cold. Mama used to make this salve from beeswax and herbs. I hope you don't mind. I thought it might help." Leo's throat tightened. He longed to thank her, to tell her he was awake, but something held him back. He didn't want to break the spell. Not yet. By the fifth night, Amelia's voice had grown more open, almost confessional. "Mrs. Clark says you built all this with your own hands," she murmured, wiping his desk. "Papa would have admired that. He always said America was a place where a man could make anything of himself. Of course, he said that about his investments, too, and we all know how that ended." Her voice cracked, and she quickly added, "Still, I'm grateful for this place." Some of the girls on the train weren't so lucky. One went to work in a dance hall in the city. She cried the whole last day, knowing what kind of job it was. "That could have been me if not for you." Leo clenched his fists beneath the blanket. How had he never noticed the immense strength this timid girl held in her small frame? But on the seventh night, everything changed. Amelia entered as usual, but her steps were unsteady. Her face, flushed in the firelight, was slick with sweat. She set the tray down with trembling hands and swayed on her feet. "Just a little fever," she whispered. "Finish the chores, Amelia. Don't be weak." When she stumbled, Leo could no longer pretend. He surged forward, catching her before she fell. "Miss Miller." His voice startled her. Her grey eyes widened in shock and shame. "You were awake," she gasped. "You knew this whole time." "You're burning up," Leo interrupted, steadying her. "You shouldn't be on your feet." "I'm fine," she protested weakly. "Please don't trouble Mrs. Clark. If she thinks I can't work, sit," Leo commanded, guiding her into the chair opposite his own. His tone left no room for argument. Moments later, Mrs. Clark arrived, taking one look at Amelia before clucking her tongue. "Fever. I knew you looked pale at dinner." Amelia shrank into herself. "I didn't want to be a burden." "Burden," the housekeeper scoffed. "Girl, nearly working yourself into the grave isn't a kindness to anyone." Leo's jaw tightened. "Send Tom for Dr. Miller, now." Mrs. Clark blinked. "At this hour? For a servant's fever? For one of my people?" Leo said firmly. Send him. Amelia's cheeks flushed. You must think me a fool, talking to you while you pretended to sleep. Saying all those things, Leo's gaze softened. Not foolish, kind, kinder than I deserved. She lowered her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The doctor arrived an hour later, grumbling about late-night calls. After examining Amelia, he straightened with a sigh. Exhaustion, underweight, overworked. Nothing rest and proper food won't cure. She'll live if she stays in bed. He gave Leo a long, knowing look. Strange to see you so concerned for a maid, Hayes, but good to see you care about something beyond cattle and ledgers again. When Amelia was settled in her small room, Leo lingered, staring at the little tin of sap she had made for him. A maid with nothing to her name had noticed his pain and sought to ease it. The gesture humbled him completely. For 3 days, Amelia remained in bed by his order. Despite her protests, she worried about losing her position and being a burden. Girl doesn't understand kindness, Mrs. Clark said. Been kicked too many times to expect anything else. On the 4th day, Leo knocked gently on her door. Amelia was sitting up, sewing despite her pallor. At the sight of him, she tried to rise, but he waved her back. How are you feeling? He asked, pulling a chair close. Much better, sir. I'll be back to work tomorrow, I promise. You will return when Dr. Miller says you are ready. Not before. He paused, then took a breath. I owe you an apology. Amelia's brow furrowed. For what? For deceiving you. For pretending to sleep and listening when I should not have. She flushed crimson. Then you heard everything. Everything, he admitted. Oh, how mortifying, she whispered, covering her face. Not mortifying, he said softly. Illuminating. Amelia, your kindness reminded me that simple compassion still exists in this world. You've done more for me in a few weeks than wealth or land ever could. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. I know what loss feels like, Mr. Hayes. I only wanted you not to feel so alone. He reached for her hand, his voice low and rough. You will do no more scrubbing floors. When you are well, I'd like you to be head maid. Better wages, lighter duties. You've earned it. Her lips parted in shock. But I've only been here 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, you've shown more heart than most people do in a lifetime. He rose to leave, but she stopped him with a whisper. Mr. Hayes, were you truly awake every night? He allowed a small smile. Every night. She buried her face in her hands with a groan. But Leo walked away with a new sensation stirring in his chest, one he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The storm that tested that hope came weeks later. A February blizzard rolled down from the mountains without warning, burying the valley in snow and howling winds. Leo rode out to check the pregnant cows, but the storm struck faster than expected. Hours later, half frozen, he staggered back to the ranch, his body more ice than flesh. The kitchen door flew open, and Amelia was there. Mr. Hayes, she cried, her face white with fear. She caught his arm as he nearly collapsed, dragging him into the blessed warmth. His hands were white, waxy, nearly frostbitten. Amelia knelt before him without hesitation, chafing them between her own. Oh, no, she whispered fiercely. Not you, not like this. Hold on. For the next hour, she and Mrs. Clark fought to warm him, spooning broth past his chattering teeth and rubbing life back into his frozen limbs. When the pain came, a burning agony, as blood returned, Amelia never let go of his hands. You're safe, she whispered, holding him close against her warmth. You're home. Sleep now. Leo drifted into unconsciousness with her voice anchoring him, and when he woke, sunlight on his face, the first thing he saw was Amelia dozing in a chair by his bedside, her hands still wrapped around his. For the first time since Eleanor and Thomas, Leo Hayes felt truly alive. Spring arrived slowly that year, the snow melting into streams that cut through the Wyoming Valley, leaving the land fresh and green once more. The ranch bustled with new live calves, stumbling on unsteady legs, wildflowers dotting the fields, and the sense of renewal filled the air. For Leo Hayes, it was not just the land that was changing, it was his heart. He had lived for too long in the shadow of grief, closing himself off, believing no sunlight could ever reach him again. But Amelia Miller had walked quietly into his house, into his life, and with her gentle hands and quiet words, she had broken through walls that wealth and work could never tear down. Every day he found himself seeking her presence. At first it was small things, asking her opinion on the arrangement of flowers in the parlor, or lingering a little longer when she brought tea. But soon it was more. One afternoon he found her mending a shirt by the window, her face lit by the warm glow of the sun. He stopped in the doorway, watching silently until she looked up, startled. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked, her cheeks flushing. "Leo," he corrected softly, her hands stilled on the fabric. I shouldn't. You've cared for me more honestly than anyone has in years," he said, stepping closer. "If anyone has the right to call me by name, it's you." Her lips trembled, but she whispered, "Leo." It was the sweetest sound he had heard in a long time. One evening, the valley gathered for a barn dance at a neighboring ranch. Music filled the air, fiddles and laughter carrying across the night. Leo stood at the edge of the crowd, his fine coat and boots marking him as the richest man there. Yet he felt strangely apart. That was until he saw Amelia. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but in Leo's eyes, she was the brightest star in the room. She stood off to the side, uncertain, her hands clasped tightly. A group of young men glanced her way, but none approached. She was too quiet, too guarded. Leo crossed the floor without hesitation. "Miss Miller," he said, offering his hand, "would you grant me this dance?" Her eyes widened. "Oh, no, I couldn't. Everyone will stare. Let them." His voice was firm but kind. "Please." She hesitated, then slowly placed her hand in his. The music swelled, and Leo led her across the floor. At first, her steps were clumsy, her face flushed with nerves, but Leo's steady hand guided her, and soon she was laughing an unguarded, joyous sound that turned every head in the barn. For a moment, Leo felt the weight of his grief lift, replaced by something new, something bright. When the song ended, the crowd clapped, and Amelia tried to pull away, but Leo held her hand. "One more?" he asked softly. She met his gaze, her grey eyes shining. "One more." But not everyone approved. Whispers began to spread through town. The wealthy rancher and the maid. People said Amelia was reaching above her station, that Leo was blinded by loneliness. Some called her a fortune seeker. Amelia heard the whispers in the market and felt the stares at church. She shrank beneath them, her old fears creeping back. One evening, she packed a small bag, intending to slip away before dawn. But when she opened the door, Leo was already there, standing in the dim light of the hall. "You are leaving," he said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't bring shame to your name. People are talking. Let them talk." His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with emotion. "Amelia, I've spent years living for what people thought, for appearances, for respectability, and it left me empty. You brought me back to life. I won't lose that because of gossip." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You deserve someone your equal." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I already found her. My equal isn't measured in wealth or land. It's measured in heart. And Amelia, yours is stronger than anyone I've ever known." Her breath caught, her body trembling. Leo, he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Stay. Please. Build a life here with me. Not as a maid, as my partner, as my wife." Amelia's tears turned to quiet sobs against his chest, but she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "yes." The wedding was small, held beneath the cottonwood trees where Eleanor and Thomas rested. Leo spoke their names softly before the ceremony, asking their blessing. The wind stirred the branches gently, as if answering. Amelia stood in a simple white dress, her hands trembling in his as they said their vows. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Leo kissed her with the promise of a new beginning. The valley would talk, of course, but Leo no longer cared. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Amelia, once a shy maid hiding her pain, now stood at his side as his equal, his partner, his love. Together, they faced the wide open west, not as two broken souls, but as one. And in the quiet of the ranch house that night, Leo whispered into the dark, "Tomorrow is a new day." Amelia smiled, her head resting on his chest. "Yes," she said softly, "and this time we'll face it together."